5-year-old boy walked out of his front door on a Friday morning to catch the school bus. He never made it to the end of the driveway. And for 2 full days, while over 100 people searched every inch of the property calling his name, his body was hidden right there on the same land. In a camper, in a cabinet, waiting to be found. Except here is the part that will stay with you long after this video ends. Multiple people had already opened that camper. Multiple people had already looked inside that cabinet. And they found nothing, because the body was not there yet. Someone put it there later. Someone who was walking among the searchers. Someone who was close enough to this family to know exactly when it was safe to move him. It took 34 years to make an arrest. It took another 2 years for a judge to throw the case out entirely. And today, in the eyes of the law, no one is responsible for the death of 5-year-old Justin Lee Turner. Welcome to Black Veil Crime Files. I am your narrator, and tonight we are pulling back the veil on one of the most heartbreaking, most infuriating cold cases in South Carolina history. A little boy who deserved justice. A family who spent decades fighting for it. And a legal system that ultimately failed them both. Hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Justin's story. Subscribe to Black Veil Crime Files with notifications turned on, because we cover every case like this one with the facts front and center and the victim always at the heart of it. Justin Lee Turner was 5 years old, and his story deserves to be told. Let us begin. Who was Justin Lee Turner? Before we talk about suspects and evidence and courtrooms and dismissals, I need you to understand who Justin Lee Turner was. Because cases like this one have a way of reducing a child to a headline, to a case number, to a piece of evidence. And Justin Turner deserves far better than that. Justin was 5 years old, a kindergartner, blonde hair, blue eyes, bright and affectionate and full of the kind of easy joy that belongs specifically to children who feel loved and safe in the world. He was the kid who lit up a room without trying. The kind of boy who had a best friend on the school bus and a favorite cereal and a whole future stretching out ahead of him. He lived with his biological father Victor Turner and his stepmother Pamela Turner in a modest home on Horseshoe Road near Moncks Corner in rural Berkeley County, South Carolina. Every school morning he would walk down the dirt road to his neighbor's house and catch the bus to Whitesville Elementary alongside his best friend, a boy also named Justin Smith. The two of them were inseparable. The kind of close that only exists between small children who have decided the other person is their person. His biological mother, Vivian Elaine Pace, who went by Elaine, was not in the home. She and Victor had gone through a bitter divorce, and Victor had been granted primary custody. But Elaine was devoted. She called constantly. She took Justin on weekends. She loved her son with everything she had, and she fought to be present in his life within every boundary the court had set. Justin knew he was loved on both sides. He had a mother who adored him and a father and stepmother who raised him every day. On the morning of March 3rd, 1989, Justin ate breakfast, his favorite cereal. He got ready for school, and he walked out of the front door of his home toward the bus stop at the end of the dirt road. He was 5 years old. The walk was short. The road was quiet. The neighborhood was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Justin Turner never made it to the bus stop. He was never seen alive again. The disappearance and the search. When the school bus arrived at Whitesville Elementary that morning without Justin aboard, his kindergarten classmates noticed immediately. They assumed he must be homesick. Children that age do not yet have the vocabulary for anything darker. But by afternoon, when Justin still had not appeared, concern began to build. After school, Justin's best friend recalled that Justin's stepmother Pamela came around 4:30 or 5 in the afternoon asking neighbors if they had seen him. His friend told her Justin had not been on the bus that day, that he assumed Justin was home. At that moment, the gravity of the situation became undeniable. Justin was missing. Pamela called 911 immediately. Berkeley County Sheriff's deputies James Gaither and Philip Mason responded that evening. Law enforcement and neighbors began searching the area around the Turner property. Family members, volunteers, and officers fanned out along the road and into the surrounding fields and woods calling Justin's name. Flashlights cut through the gathering dark as worry mounted with every passing hour. They searched the house and yard. They checked inside vehicles and outbuildings. They crawled beneath the home. They combed the pine forests in grid patterns and dredged nearby ponds. Tracking dogs and rescue teams were brought in as darkness fell. Friends and family desperately tried to recall if Justin had ever wandered off before. He had not. In this tight-knit community where everyone knew their neighbors, no one reported seeing any strangers or hearing any disturbances. Justin had simply vanished on a short walk he had made dozens of times before. By Saturday, March 4th, the search had grown exponentially. Over 100 people joined the effort, including Berkeley County Sheriff's deputies, local police, firefighters, and civilian volunteers. Search and rescue units scoured a widening radius around the Turner property. Parents kept their children indoors. One worried grandfather in the neighborhood insisted his own young grandson stay inside the fenced backyard under watchful eyes rather than play in the front yard. The idea that a child could disappear in broad daylight on a quiet country road left the entire community rattled and afraid. Searchers pressed on into a second night. No trace of Justin. The case increasingly looked like an abduction. Berkeley County investigator Lieutenant Sidney Rahn, one of the lead detectives, later remarked how dozens of investigators had been on that property all weekend long without finding the boy. This raised a deeply troubling question. If Justin was there to be found, how had everyone missed him? And if he truly was not on the property, that meant someone had taken him far away. The discovery that changed everything. After 2 agonizing days of searching, the tense atmosphere broke with a startling discovery on Sunday morning, March 5, 1989. Justin's father, Victor Turner, was combing through the family's property yet again alongside investigators. This time Victor approached a travel camper parked on the Turners' own land. A camper that, by all accounts, had already been checked multiple times. Victor pulled open a cabinet door inside the camper and immediately shouted, "Here he is! Here he is!" Other searchers heard Victor's voice and rushed over. Someone called out for everyone to stand back. And in that moment, the worst fear of an entire community became real. Inside a built-in storage compartment of the camper lay the small, lifeless body of Justin Turner, curled up inside the cabinet as if someone had hastily hidden him there. Victor had located his missing son, but it was not a joyous discovery. The little boy was clearly deceased. People crowded around in shock. Some broke down in tears at the scene. The area was immediately taped off as a crime scene. When Berkeley County deputies and forensic technicians carefully examined Justin's body, they noted several critical details that would shape everything that followed. Justin had been strangled. He showed signs of sexual assault. The autopsy confirmed he was killed by ligature strangulation, likely with some kind of strap or leash, and he had been sexually violated with a cylindrical object. These findings horrified even veteran investigators. As Lieutenant Rahn would say years later, he could not think of a more tragic, horrendous murder of a 5-year-old boy. The autopsy found undigested food in Justin's stomach, indicating he died roughly between late morning and early afternoon on March 3rd. The cinnamon cereal he had eaten for breakfast that morning. In other words, Justin was likely killed within hours of the moment he disappeared. He never made it past his own property. And then there was the detail that truly disturbed investigators. Justin's body felt unusually cold to the touch when recovered. Far colder than expected for a body that had been lying at ambient temperatures for 2 days. Several searchers remarked on how strangely cold he felt, almost as if he had been refrigerated. This led investigators to speculate that the killer may have stored Justin's body in a freezer or cold space to slow decomposition and suppress odor during the intensive search. A chest freezer was seized from the Turner property and examined for any evidence that a body had been inside. But the detail that chilled investigators most of all was this. The camper had already been searched multiple times. Officers, family members, and volunteers had all opened compartments in that camper and found nothing. Yet here was Justin's body, unmistakably present on Sunday morning. The implication was inescapable. Someone had moved the body. Someone had hidden it elsewhere during the first 2 days of searching, and only after the searches began to wind down had they placed Justin inside that cabinet. Sheriff Dwayne Lewis later confirmed it directly. Reports from the search teams indicated Justin was not there before in the very spot where he was found. The body had been moved, and whoever moved it had access to the property during the search. That person was almost certainly still among them. The evidence that pointed inward. I can share this video right now, because what this case reveals next is where it gets truly disturbing. Justin's clothing and shoes were remarkably clean when his body was found. No mud, no grass, no pine needles. Nothing that would suggest he had been running through the rural woods or lying exposed outdoors. Instead, the evidence indicated Justin had been killed indoors or in a clean enclosed area and then carried to the hiding spot in the camper already lifeless. His short walk to the bus stop may never have happened at all. The camper itself was on the Turners' private property and kept locked. According to a later affidavit, only Victor and Pamela Turner had keys and regular access to that camper before Justin's body was discovered. The location where the body was hidden, a specific built-in cabinet, was not somewhere a stranger or random passerby would logically choose. It was somewhere chosen by a person who knew that campers lay out intimately. Someone completely comfortable on that property. Pamela Turner's initial statements contained inconsistencies that immediately raised suspicion. She told investigators she had been in the shower that morning and assumed Justin left for the bus on his own. At first, she even claimed Justin had gotten on the school bus and gone to school that day. This was quickly and completely disproven. The school confirmed Justin had never arrived. His bus friend confirmed Justin never showed up at the neighbor's driveway that morning. Neighbors confirmed they never saw Justin on the road at all. When caught in this lie, Pamela amended her story to simply say she had not seen Justin after the morning and only realized something was wrong when he did not come home on the bus that afternoon. The shifting narrative was not the only red flag. Under pressure, Pamela admitted she had a heated confrontation with Justin that morning before his supposed departure. Several people told investigators they had heard or witnessed Pamela disciplining Justin earlier on March 3rd. A detail she had deliberately withheld in her initial account. Investigators could not ignore the possibility that this altercation was the flashpoint. Victor Turner's discovery of the body also invited intense scrutiny. Fellow searchers were perplexed at how directly and immediately Victor zeroed in on that specific cabinet on Sunday morning. Lieutenant Wren noted that Victor pulled the cabinet right open as if he knew exactly where to look. And then at the crime scene, in the immediate aftermath of finding his son's body, Victor was overheard asking a law enforcement officer a question that no grieving father should logically be asking in that moment. What would happen if someone in the family had done this? Investigators noted Victor's tone as nervous when he asked it, almost as if he was testing how the law would respond to a family member who had harmed Justin rather than reacting with the uncontrolled grief of a parent who had just found his murdered child. Deputy Philip Mason, one of the first responders, insisted he had personally searched the camper thoroughly on day one. But when subjected to a polygraph examination about the thoroughness of that search, Deputy Mason failed the lie detector. Pamela Turner also submitted to a polygraph on March 6th and failed. She had taken Valium before the test, which can affect results, so a second examination was scheduled. Before that could happen, the Berkeley County Sheriff publicly announced to reporters that Pamela Turner was being considered as suspect in Justin's murder. Pamela immediately ceased cooperating with investigators on the advice of an attorney. The follow-up polygraph was canceled, and from that point forward she exercised her right to remain silent. Charges filed and dropped, the first time. Despite the mounting circumstantial evidence, investigators faced a fundamental forensic problem that Lieutenant Wren would articulate plainly years later. No DNA evidence could definitively solve this case because any biological material from Victor or Pamela found on Justin or in the camper had a perfectly innocent explanation. They all lived together. Their fingerprints, hair, and fibers were supposed to be there. There was no smoking gun, no distinct foreign evidence. Everything at the scene could be explained as belonging there under completely normal circumstances. A grand jury convened in late 1989. In December of that year, approximately 9 months after Justin's death, Pamela Turner was formally charged with homicide and arrested. She was released on a bond of $100,000. The community reacted intensely. Many were convinced Pamela had done it. Justin's childhood friend Justin Smith later said he hoped they would find the people responsible and put them in the electric chair. Others who knew Pamela found it difficult to accept given her lack of any prior history of violence. Victor Turner was not charged at that time. Investigators likely hoped Pamela, if guilty, would eventually crack and confess, possibly implicating Victor in the process. But Pamela did not waver. She denied harming Justin through her attorney, and the case moved toward trial on circumstantial evidence alone. In mid-1990, the Berkeley County prosecutors presented their case to a grand jury seeking a formal indictment for murder. The grand jury refused to indict. The charge was dropped. Legally, Pamela was now free, and the case reverted to an unsolved homicide with no one held accountable. The Berkeley County Sheriff's Office stated publicly that Pamela would remain a suspect and the case would stay open. But without an indictment, the momentum of the investigation collapsed entirely. Not long after the charges were dropped, Victor and Pamela Turner relocated away from Berkeley County. Pamela legally changed her first name from Pamela to Megan in an effort to distance herself from the infamy attached to her name. The couple moved to a different county in South Carolina and lived a quiet, low-profile life. They never once contacted the Berkeley County Sheriff's Office to check on the status of the investigation or to ask whether new leads had emerged in the murder of the child they had raised. To investigators, that silence was deafening. It stood in direct contrast to Justin's maternal relatives, who continuously stayed in touch with authorities and pushed relentlessly for the case to remain active. A mother who never stopped fighting. Justin's biological mother, Elaine Pace, struggled with grief and frustration for the rest of her life. She harbored deep suspicions. She believed Pamela knew far more than she ever revealed. She became a vocal and tireless advocate for her son, regularly contacting the sheriff's office and local media to remind anyone who would listen that Justin's killer was still walking free. For 15 years, Elaine pushed. She called. She showed up. She refused to let her son's case be filed away and forgotten. And then in 2004, at the age of 47, Elaine Pace passed away after a long illness. She did not live to see justice. In her final days, she made her husband Russell promise to continue the fight on her behalf. "She told me not to give up," Russell later said. "Keep it in the news. Fight the battle for her." He committed to fulfilling that dying wish, carrying the torch for a 5-year-old boy and the mother who never stopped loving him. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, the case remained technically open but functionally inactive. Justin's extended family on his mother's side refused to let it rest. They kept his memory alive with photographs and stories. They collected every scrap of information or rumor that circulated around Monk's Corner. And in 2014, on the 25th anniversary of Justin's death, his cousin Amy Parsons created a Justice for Justin Lee Turner page on social media and began organizing public pressure on authorities to re-examine the evidence. Amy gave interviews to local media. She reminded the public of the innocent little boy who never got to grow up. She spoke directly to whoever was living with the knowledge of what happened. "Somebody has lived with this for now over 25 years, Amy told reporters. "That is a long time to live with a weight on your shoulders. Come forward. End it now." It is as simple as that. The case reopened 32 years later. In March of 2016, 27 years after the crime, Berkeley County Sheriff Dwayne Lewis publicly announced he was reopening the cold case. Sheriff Lewis had taken office in 2015 and inherited a stack of unsolved cases. Justin's stood out immediately due to its nature and the community's unresolved grief. The sheriff assigned a new investigative team to review the case file completely from scratch, re-interviewing old witnesses where possible, examining physical evidence with techniques unavailable in 1989, following up on every lead that may have been overlooked or abandoned. Lieutenant Wren, the original lead investigator now long retired, was consulted during this renewed effort. He remained as convinced as he had always been that the scene had been staged and that the Turners were hiding the truth. He believed that if he had been allowed to continue pursuing the case in 1990, he could have built a substantial case against Pamela. He passed what he knew to Sheriff Lewis's cold case unit and hoped they might finally accomplish what he could not. The renewed investigation benefited from decades of technological advancement unavailable in 1989. Modern DNA profiling, advanced fiber analysis, computerized offender databases. Forensic experts took another look at the physical evidence that had been stored for over 30 years. Clothing, the suspected ligature, hair samples. The sheriff's office digitized and reviewed hours of old witness interviews and police reports. And slowly new leads began to surface. One crucial piece of evidence the cold case team scrutinized was the ligature used to strangle Justin. Back in 1989, investigators had noted a strap was likely the weapon, but the specific item was never conclusively identified. A dog leash had been taken from the Turner home as a potential item of interest, since the marks on Justin's neck were consistent with a thin strap or cord. The cold case detectives had this leash preserved in evidence. Using modern microscopy and forensic fiber analysis, they made a significant discovery. Tiny fibers from this leash matched fibers embedded in the neck wounds on Justin's body and on his shirt collar. A forensic link, tying a specific object from the Turner household directly to the murder. Sheriff Lewis credited new technology and forensic science for finally delivering what had eluded investigators for 30 years. Persistent testing and retesting of evidence across decades had finally produced a result. By April of 2021, the cold case team felt they had gathered enough to move forward. The fiber analysis, the inconsistencies in the Turner statements from 1989, the suspicious circumstances of the body's discovery, the camper access, the behavior at the scene, all of it compiled into a case file presented to prosecutors. Sheriff Lewis was confident. He stated publicly that they had a lot of forensic evidence and that new technology and forensic science had finally gotten them where they needed to be. The arrests, 34 years after Justin died. On January 9, 2024, Berkeley County Sheriff's deputies made the move Justin's family had been waiting for across 3.5 decades. They arrested Justin's stepmother, 66-year-old Megan Pamela Turner, and his father, 68-year-old Victor Turner, each charged with one count of murder. The arrests took place at the couple's home in Cross Hill, South Carolina, where they had been living quietly. Both were taken into custody without incident. The news sent shockwaves through the community and made headlines across the state. 34 years after a 5-year-old boy was strangled in his own home and hidden in a cabinet on his own property, the people many had always suspected were finally in handcuffs. Sheriff Lewis held a press conference displaying a photograph of Justin and announcing the breakthrough. He outlined the key evidence: the fiber match between the ligature and Justin's wounds, the suspicious behavior of the Turners in 1989, Victor's immediate discovery of the body in a location that had supposedly already been searched, the statement Victor made at the crime scene asking what would happen to a family member who had done this, a witness who recalled Pamela making a disturbing comment implying she had won a major fight with Justin, another witness who remembered the Turners asking hypothetically what would happen to someone inside the family versus an outsider if they were responsible. An eerie piece of footage also surfaced. A news crew had been present when Victor found Justin's body on March 5, 1989. The moment was caught on video. Investigators pointed to this footage as evidence of foreknowledge. Victor moved directly to that cabinet with no hesitation and called out the moment he opened it as if he already knew exactly what was inside. After their arrests, Victor and Megan Turner appeared at a bond hearing in February of 2024. Each was granted release on a $50,000 bond. The conditions required them to surrender their passports, remain in South Carolina, and have no contact with Justin's maternal family. That last condition was necessary because emotions were running extraordinarily high. Justin's cousin Amy Parsons and other surviving relatives were a visible and passionate presence at every hearing. They wore buttons with Justin's face. They wore shirts demanding justice. Amy addressed the Turners directly on social media. "For 30 years you enjoyed your freedom," she wrote. "You did not spend one day inside a prison cell for what you did to Justin. You were supposed to take care of him and love him, and instead you tortured, abused, and murdered your own child." The serial killer theory and the collapse of the case. The defense attorneys did not wait long to mount their counteroffensive. By March of 2024, defense lawyer Shah Kent filed motions to dismiss the charges, arguing the state's case was fatally flawed and that a fair trial was impossible after so much time had passed. And then he introduced a theory that stopped the courtroom cold. The defense claimed the real perpetrator may have been a convicted serial killer named Richard Mark Evenitz. Evenitz was responsible for the abduction and murder of at least 3 young girls in Virginia in the late 1990s. He died by suicide in 2002 as police closed in on him. Crucially, Evenitz had been a United States Navy sailor stationed in Charleston, South Carolina, approximately 30 miles from Moncks Corner, in 1989, the same year Justin was killed. The defense argued that Evenitz's methods in his known crimes, kidnapping children, strangling them, and sexual assault, bore disturbing similarities to what happened to Justin. And because Evenitz had been cremated, no DNA comparison could ever be made to include or exclude him. Prosecutors were caught off guard. One conceded on the record that this was pretty explosive evidence and requested additional time to investigate before proceeding. The presiding judge agreed that such significant information warranted careful consideration and postponed any ruling on the defense's motions. Meanwhile, prosecutors highlighted what physical evidence they had, including the dog leash believed to be the murder weapon. But medical experts had debated whether the leash alone could have caused the specific ligature marks on Justin's neck. Some believed the width of the marks suggested a dog collar used alongside the leash. The Turners had owned a dog in 1989. Investigators looked for the collar but could not locate it among preserved evidence. In an extraordinary step, they even exhumed the remains of the Turners' long-deceased pet dog to see if the collar had been buried with it. It had not. The defense used this to argue the state was changing its theory and that crucial evidence was simply no longer available to be examined after 35 years. On June 7, 2024, Judge Roger Young issued his ruling on the defense's motion to dismiss. And it was a ruling that devastated Justin's family. The judge granted the motion and threw out the murder charges against both Victor and Megan Turner entirely. His reasoning was methodical and final. First, the prosecution had not presented truly new evidence against the Turners, only new interpretations of existing evidence. The fiber analysis, while technologically new, was based on fibers and items available since 1989. The judge viewed the cold case revival as a second attempt with old facts rather than a case built on genuinely new discovery. Second, and most devastatingly, over 20 potential witnesses were dead or otherwise unavailable by 2024. Neighbors who had allegedly heard incriminating statements from the Turners in 1989 were gone. They could not be cross-examined. The defense could not meaningfully challenge testimony that existed only in decades-old recorded statements without live witnesses present in a courtroom. The judge ruled this would be highly prejudicial to the defendants and that the passage of time had made a fair trial impossible. The dismissal was issued with prejudice. Victor and Megan Turner can never be charged again for Justin's murder. In the eyes of the law, the case is closed. A boy who deserved more. The reaction was immediate and shattering for everyone who had spent years working toward this moment. Megan Turner spoke publicly for the first time in decades after the dismissal. "It has been a living hell," she said of 35 years under suspicion. She described changing her name and moving away to escape the infamy. She claimed investigators had it in for her and Victor from the beginning. Victor voiced relief but also bitterness. He said all he had ever wanted was to find the person who did this. He felt that by zeroing in on the family early, law enforcement had failed to investigate other leads that might have caught a real killer. Both maintained their innocence as they always had. Victor said he was glad he could hold his head up a little bit now. Justin's surviving family released a statement through the prosecutor's office. Today, they wrote, "Our justice system failed an innocent 5-year-old boy. The ones responsible for Justin's death had the chance to face justice here, but instead chose to stay silent, and will face the final justice handed out by God for eternity." They thanked Sheriff Lewis and his cold case team for fighting for Justin. They vowed the fight would never stop. Prosecutor Scarlett Wilson acknowledged the outcome with honesty. She extended sympathies to Justin's loved ones and praised the sheriff's unwavering commitment. She admitted that mistakes made 35 years ago could not be remedied and that the state would not appeal. Sometimes justice cannot be obtained after so long, even when everyone did everything they could. Sheriff Lewis, who had poured years into the case, was direct. This is not the outcome we were seeking. He respected the court's ruling but acknowledged plainly that the passage of time had essentially insulated the suspects from conviction. Today, Justin Lee Turner is buried in Somerville Cemetery in Dorchester County, South Carolina, not far from his mother Elaine's grave. At his funeral in March of 1989, over 200 mourners came to say goodbye. The small casket was surrounded by some of Justin's favorite toys and belongings, tokens of the childhood that was stolen from him. His childhood best friend Justin Smith, the boy who waited for him at the bus stop on that last Friday morning, has a tattoo of Justin Turner's face on his leg, permanent tribute to his lost friend. Smith, now an adult, still visits the grave. He has said that not a day goes by that he does not think of his buddy and wonder what really happened. Justin's cousin Amy Parsons was only 8 years old when Justin was killed. She has spent decades as the family's most visible advocate. She spearheaded the Justice for Justin movement. She never stopped calling for accountability. Even now, after the legal case is officially closed, she carries his name forward. The hardest part, she has said, is that Justin's mother Elaine did not live to see even the brief moment when charges were finally brought. 15 years of relentless fighting, and Elaine never got to see a single handcuff. What this case leaves behind is not just grief. It is a sobering lesson about the cost of those first critical hours. The camper that was not properly searched. The crime scene that was released too early and had to be re-entered. The evidence that was not preserved with enough precision to survive 35 years of legal scrutiny. One careful decision made on that first day in March of 1989 might have changed everything. Might have given Justin's family the conviction they deserved. Might have given a 5-year-old boy the justice he was owed. Instead, Justin Lee Turner remains, in the eyes of the law, an unsolved case. His killer, whoever it was, walks free. And a family that fought for 36 years is left with a statement that cuts to the bone. The truth is there. The justice is not. Justin Lee Turner, 5 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, a bowl of cinnamon cereal on a Friday morning, a walk down a dirt road he had taken 100 times before, and a door he walked out of that he never came back through. He deserved so much more. He deserved to grow up. He deserved to become whoever he was going to be. He deserved to have his name said with love and not with grief. His family will never stop saying it. And neither will we. If this video moved you, please like it right now and share it immediately. Subscribe to Black Veil Crime Files with notifications on and leave a comment below. Tell me what detail in this case stopped you cold. Tell me what you think really happened that Friday morning. Every share keeps Justin's name in front of new eyes. Every comment keeps this story in the algorithm. And every new set of eyes is one more chance that this case is never forgotten. We cover these cases because someone has to say the names the world forgot. And on this channel, those names are never forgotten. This is Black Veil Crime Files. I will see you in the next one. Black Heart.